Chris Walker, thank you so much for being here with me today and taking time out of your very busy schedule to have a chat with little old me. I am truly honored. How you doing today?
Camille, great to be here. Excited to be on the show, and I mean it's safe to say I think we're going to cover a lot about events. I don't speak that much on it, but have always been involved in the events. I think that there's a traditional way to do events that a lot of companies do, and then there's sort of like a new way of thinking about events and actually breaking them into like different event strategies. And
Yep.
so looking and different ways to measure them. So excited to get into some of those details with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dig in as well because I've, been following your thought leadership for some time now and always have to say, I agree with a lot of what you say and then there's like I'm like yes and I want to apply this to event marketing. And I want to kick us off right there because you've been talking a lot about the fact that there's never been a better time to be a B2B marketer right now. And I couldn't agree more. And I think, you actually just posted something very recently, and everything that you said was spot on. I would just maybe add that I think there's actually never been a better time to be a B2B event marketer for a number of reasons. And I want to start there and get your thoughts. Like, share with me a little bit more this your kind of reasoning behind this thought, and which I totally agree, but unpack it for our listeners a little bit. Why is it the best time to be a B2B marketer? And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on being a B2B event marketer. I have some thoughts, but you said all the rules have kind of gone out the window, and I think that is very, very true. Certainly for events, you think about the end of marketing with cookies and the rise of AI and how the B2B buyer journey has changed and evolved so very much. You talk a lot about social platforms and communities being at the center, right, of our demand creation strategies. So I'm curious how you see events playing into all of that.
Yeah, first off, there's never been a better time to be a B2B marketer. I've seen this for myself since 2017 when most people didn't recognize it, right? I still believe this in 2017 when I worked at companies, but at that time, most companies were like, all we need is our sales team and marketing can help us out where we need it or things like that. And I saw how buyers were shifting and how our outbound sales motion and our sales led motion without some level of demand generation and marketing was getting less and less effective when you look at cost of acquisition, sales productivity, quota attainment, things like that. So I started to see this pattern very early, and now people are starting to recognize it more. Fundamentally, because of the way that B2B buyers want to buy has shifted, which has put a lot more on what we call like sort of one to many or marketing strategies rather than sales and one to one. And because it aligns with how buyers want to buy, I think that marketing is very well positioned to be able to take advantage and be the key growth driver inside of a company outside of product. And I know you need all of the things, but I think that marketing can be the thing that really breaks a company out today. And we've seen examples of that, including my company, Drift, Gong, many others. Great product, but also exceptional forward-thinking marketing. I also think that because of the way that buyers have changed, there's become a very large divergence between the people who understand how the world actually works today when it comes to marketing and customer acquisition and the people who think it still works the way that it did in 2015. And so the people that still think it works the way in 2015 have continued to be obsessed with performance marketing and SEO and conversion optimization and a lot of the old, content syndication, building different ebooks and gating them, building a trade show booth. We'll get into events, but building trade show booths, all the things that you used to do that they still do today. Meanwhile, over the past 10 years, they haven't figured out how to produce content for social, which is significantly different and more difficult than producing it for search engines. They
Mm-hmm.
haven't figured out how to evolve their overall event strategy. They haven't figured out how to adjust their KPIs. They haven't figured out how to do customer research. They haven't figured out a lot of these things over the past because they've been stuck in the same way that they measure and the same tactics that they've been doing for a long time. And so I see this divergence in marketers where the gap keeps getting wider and wider. And you're going to have this top echelon 3 to 10% of marketers that really know how it works. And I think that they're going to be rewarded for all the work that they've done to be ahead of where the world is today.
I mean, here to that, to just being ahead of the game, and recognizing what is going to be setting the top of the top, the creme de la creme, when it comes to not only marketing but successful businesses, right? Because this is
I
going
want
to
to clarify
be
one
make or
thing.
break.
It's important. It's important. The people that are there are not ahead of the game. They're where the game
Okay.
is right now. That was my bad. So I'm correcting.
Okay.
They're not ahead. They're not out there trying to figure out how to make VR sell B2B, 7-figure solutions. They're where the world is today. Buyers are using social networks every day. Dark social is real. The way that they buy is nonlinear. Like they're just so it's there's a difference between being ahead of the game. A lot of people that are ahead of the game are actually too early. But I don't want people to be confused. The world, where the world is right now, is here, and a lot of people aren't there.
Yeah. So talk to me about how those people who are there are setting the tone, and how are they using. I want to talk about building pipeline and revenue with you, because I think that's important to any B2B marketer.
There is.
But I want to kind of follow the path that I think you talk a lot about laying out, right? Before you can get to building the pipeline and the revenue, there's like the cart before the horse. You have to create that demand. And I think what you talk a lot about is how at the center of that, it should really be about community building, engagement, educating people, right? So that when they are in the market and ready to buy, then they're going to be familiar with their brand. They're already part of your community. Hopefully, they've attended one of your events. You posted recently on LinkedIn, the 25 things that B2B buyers do all the time that never get tracked by attribution software.
It's real.
Loved, it's so real, so real. And saw a few shout outs to events strategically placed in there, as you were basically just like giving us an example B2B buyer's journey, which is, it's non-linear today, and it's also self-directed in a lot of ways. So when you think about leveraging events, in just building community and engagement, right? Like, how are you doing that, or what are you seeing that is actually working for marketers today?
Yeah, I think first off, we need to think about our event strategy in 3 different ways. We have to think about, we have events that are used to create demand and also
Mm-hmm.
create content. We have events that are used to capture demand and try and get people into an actual sales process. And then we have events that are related to converting demand or overall pipeline acceleration, which is where a lot of events are being used today. But people just call them events, put them all together, and then try and think about so really thinking and being intentional about what is the goal of this event, how are
Yeah.
we going to set KPIs, and what are we trying to do, I think is super, super important.
Yeah.
And then when we look at actually using it to create demand, I think that there's a couple of key things. Like, I think an event gives you a consistent way to create content. If you do it on a consistent basis, like every week, like what I used to do, it gives you a live form of customer feedback and insights. You actually get questions, comments, responses from the live event. So it allows you to clarify your perspective and create better information. Then you can go and take that and convert it into a podcast, a YouTube video, a video for your website, short form video for LinkedIn or TikTok or Instagram Reels or whatever you want to do, and push it all downstream. All that
Mm-hmm.
stuff used to, and then get insights on the comments and the feedback inside of the social platforms. And so there's a whole loop of not only the content creation, but also the distribution, which leads you to insights. And so the goal of those types of events, for me, not for everybody, but for me, is to create great content that's going to be consumed asynchronously at scale. That's what a live event is. I don't care if there are 10 people on the event, which I do many of them that have 10 people on it, or
Mm-hmm.
there's 500, 5,000. Like, marketers have been trained to think, oh, we're doing an event, we need to get 5,000 leads. But when you segment off and say, what is the purpose of this event? I think that the point of these types of events to create demand or to create great information, to build affinity and community, and to create content that can be distributed downstream asynchronously.
Yeah. So I guess my next question would be, how are you? Well, no, first I want to talk about, you know, you're creating demand, right? From these events. I want to talk about the other category that you said a lot of companies are doing right now, the events to really impact pipeline and revenue more kind of towards the end of that buyer's journey. Um, what are your thoughts on, because I know you have some very strong opinions on, in general, marketing being used to make sales easier, right? And so I think in this scenario, you could have an event that is being used to make a sale easier. And I think I want to comment on, like you said for a second, just put a pinpoint in what I was about to ask you, and comment on what you just said in terms of really what you're speaking to is, I think, quality over quantity, right? We used to be going after, we need 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 people registering or attending an event. And now I think a lot of us are seeing, I actually don't necessarily need that. I need 10 to 20 buyers who are ready to buy right now. But that is not necessarily for those demand creation events, right? Those are the people who are already in the market. You've already hopefully created some demand with them, and you've nurtured them along this buyer's journey. So I'm curious if you have an example of a successful event that you've heard of, or either leveraged for Refine Labs, where it's later stage and you're really able to, you have that clarity of goals around pipeline that you're trying to impact and revenue that you're trying to see. Do you have any ideas in terms of what's working? Because I think, what I hear a lot from the marketers I speak to is they want the specifics. Yes, we know we need to leverage maybe an in-person event after we've done a few virtual events and use that in-person event to close the deal. But I'm curious if you have seen or heard any example, like real life examples of that, and what that event looked like, and what the result was.
Yeah, so let's just be clear, because I see them as two different things. Pipeline
Okay.
acceleration means that you have an active opportunity with this person, and you're trying to, increase the win rate or shorten the sales cycle, or have some type of impact on the actual live deal.
Yeah.
Versus hosting an event where you're trying to collect leads and convert them into a sales opportunity. I see them as two separate things. So let's focus on
Yes.
pipeline. Let's focus on pipeline acceleration. It's interesting to consider whether these types of events are actually marketing events or sales events. So that's the first thing to think about. Just because marketing is the department that puts together all of the events,
Mm-hmm.
events in the traditional way, when we're running an event to try and get a customer or get a set of prospective customers to close faster or to win more, is this actually a marketing event or is it a sales event? I've been to these events. I've been doing them since 2016, where we would go to trade shows and we would host dinners with accounts that were in pipeline on our tier
Mm-hmm.
one ABM list. And we would invite two of our best customers, like Boston Children's Hospital and them. And we'd have a dinner with three accounts. Two of them are our customers. One of them we want to close for a 7-figure deal. And we'd have the dinner. And yeah, me from marketing would come and me would do some of the logistics. But most of the people in the room are our chief revenue officer and the salesperson working the deal and the area director. And then all
Yeah.
the customers. It's not a market. It's not a marketing event. They're super impactful, but like in the way that we did this at this company, like sales put those together. Sales basically put those together, decided who they were, set the strategy, and then just get support. So I'm not saying that's the right way to do it, but as
Mm-hmm.
I've been in them, and as a person who now like goes to conferences and accelerates pipeline for deals that I'm working by having in-person meetings, it really feels more like sales than marketing to me. I don't know what to say. So that's something.
Okay.
It's really something to think about there. Um, so that's one thing, and I think that the outcomes that you're trying to drive with these types of events are to increase win rate and shorten sales cycles.
Yes.
So I think those are the two key metrics that you want to move. You're going to have you're going to need to have some level of volume to understand whether or not this is working or not, right? You can't do one event with one account and say, because that account closed in 54 days instead of 60 days, that events are better. You can't do this. So you need some level of scale to actually understand whether this is working or not. Or you could just consider baking it in. If these are like high paying accounts, tier one accounts, you could just consider baking it into the cost of acquisition, saying if we ever get an opportunity with this account who's going to pay us seven figures, then we'll spend $10,000 on a dinner to
Mm-hmm.
close that account.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of ways that you could look at it.
I really appreciate that perspective shift of, is this a marketing event or is it a sales event? And, whether or not marketing is involved, which hopefully your marketing team is involved, because at least I am one to always preach
Totally
like
agree.
no rogue events. Like, we are one cohesive revenue team. So I have to be involved. Marketing, sales, you want to do something great. Let's talk about how we can do it. Um, any thoughts on, I hear this all the time about this challenge between marketing and sales alignment. So I guess if for the B2B marketers who are struggling to maybe show the value to their sales team or sales leaders, right? That they should be investing, that their teams should be taking these events, call it a sales event, call it a marketing event.
Matter.
It's a revenue generating event, right?
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, we're one revenue team. What would be your advice to those B2B marketers who are really struggling to develop successful partnership with the sales org within their revenue team, to drive success from these types of hopefully revenue generating events?
Yeah, I mean, the places where sales, marketing, alignment present, I have probably worked with 200 companies over the past 4 years now. I'm actively working with three right now. Same problems in 2023 that I diagnosed and solved for companies in 2019. There are two reasons why you have sales and marketing misalignment. Number one is that the marketing metrics do not align with the sales team outcomes. So
Mm.
I've been saying the same shit for like 5 or 6 years now. And so you got the marketing team that's 150% to their MQL goal. They're 101% to their stage one opportunity goal. They're 60% to their qualified opportunity or qualified pipeline goal. And their sales team missed quota by 45%. And so marketing's over here. We hit all our marketing metrics downstream. I guess sales isn't converting these good enough. It must be, you know what I mean? The common type of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And then it's just the fact that the marketing metrics are not aligned with sales metrics. That's number one.
Yeah.
The other potential one is that the executive team does it subconsciously or consciously decides that marketing isn't that important to derive business outcomes from, and pushes that into the culture that sales is the way to get it done. They overinvest in sales. They glorify the sales team. The sales team goes on President's Club, but no one else on the go-to-market team does. And you have this cultural reason why sales is prioritized over marketing, which then moves downstream and creates misalignment. And oftentimes these two things happen interconnected. Um, and so as a individual contributor B2B marketer, you do not have that much influence on changing that in a mid-size or large scale organization.
Right.
What you do have influence on is actually making an impact. And so what I did back in the day when I knew that marketing was working really well and we had misalignment with sales and KPIs and a lot of the culture issues that I had mentioned, that I picked two of the 40, we probably had 45 reps. I picked two of the 45 that were actually bought in. We ran pilots in their territories. One of them closed a deal in the fourth quarter that was huge and made President's Club for the first time, and made two success stories around reps that followed the process and were successful. And then what
Mm-hmm.
happened in the next year? All the reps wanted that support because they saw two people hit goals that they didn't hit because we ran pilots for them. If you are geographically territorialized, this is an easy way to run a pilot at a low cost instead of rolling it out across the whole company with reps that are actually bought in and want it to be successful and are respected within the org. Then make it be successful and then help them be your champions to push it down to all the other reps that trust them.
Yeah.
You have to have a couple of reps to pave the way, often, not always. And you have to have a chief revenue officer that's on board. Those are the head of sales.
I love that. That feels very clear and very actionable. And I got to shout out I have some reps at Splash that doing the same thing. And I pull them in to work on playbooks with me for our different event programs. Um, yeah, I love that. I love how you just perfectly distilled that down. Anyone who's listening in, because I swear to you, Chris, this is probably the top challenge I hear from our community.
Hmm.
There's some other common threads when it comes to challenges. Proving ROI is definitely one, and measuring results effectively. But and then getting, taking the insights from those measurements and feeding that back into sales and making sure it's a well-oiled machine. But I think part of at the crux of what is making the rest of that feel even more challenging is not having necessarily that partnership or that trust established, which is what you need for the alignment. Can we switch gears, because I have you here and I need to take advantage of this time. I want to talk more about, we just spent a little bit of time talking about pipeline generation, or even, increasing win rate and sales velocity through events. But let's back up a little bit and go back to just pure demand creation before we're getting to pipeline, right? You mentioned, and you've talked a lot about, you've given a lot of advice for free. Folks, this is free advice, free game. But you talk a lot about like how to get started when it comes to either making sure that you have great content to distribute. My question for you is really, um, how are you making the decisions what content to cover when? And what are you building events around? What are you saving just for a podcast? What is just for a LinkedIn post? How do you take your content strategy, your social strategy? I'm really trying to ask you about dark social strategy, but there's so many threads we could pull on here, right? And I'm curious how you've brought all of those threads together cohesively in a way that makes sense for you and your team can action on. I know that you have a very well-oiled machine at Refine Labs that makes it easy for you to scale up content, scale up events as you need to. I'm just curious if you can kind of unpack how you got started with that, and maybe like what are some of the like early inflection points of like of scale, like where do you start, and then what does level 2 and level 3 look like?
Totally. Yeah. I'll go through the order of how we built it first, but just to level set, dark social content strategy. My belief is that in 2013 to 2017, every company ran HubSpot's SEO strategy. And in 2020, 2021 forward, every company should be running a dark social content strategy built for social networks, not search engines. And so when you think about that, it's starting with some recurring live event. It doesn't have to be live, but I think that it's more effective when it is recurring live event, which then creates a long form video out the gate and a long form podcast straight away. Then you take some team of editors, whether they're in the US, they're in-house, you offshore it for $50 a video or less. You then create social media content that is short form that you can put out in video format on a place like LinkedIn would be a good place to start. Then through that set of actions, you generate a huge level of insights from the questions that people ask, the comments that people have, the objections people present, blah, 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 blah. Those
Mm-hmm.
insights then feed back and deliver what are the things that we're going to talk about in the next event. So when we started with this, the first thing that I did is I hosted a one-on-one free consulting call with people because no one wanted to have me on their podcast when nobody knew me. And so I just hosted, hey, someone wants help with their Facebook ads, I'll help. 15 minutes, happy to do it. I'm going to record my side of the call. Yours will be totally confidential. And I did that for a bunch of time. And then I had clips of me answering live questions from people that actually needed help in a way that showed me as credible and experienced.
So
Then all of a
smart.
sudden I put those things out. And then people are like, hey, what you said about that Facebook ad, or what you did about this, or how you're using LinkedIn, or how you think about KPIs. Those are all really interesting to me or my audience. I would love to talk to you about that if you want to come on our podcast. Then all of a sudden I'm getting invited to be guests on podcasts, which are then continue to create. And now at this point, we're not even doing a podcast, by the way. This is short form video for LinkedIn. Then I'm on podcasts, being guests. We still only use it for LinkedIn. Then the and we were doing in-person events. If I really go back in time, in
Yeah, let's go there.
2019, 2020, we did in-person events. I did one with Josh Braun, Justin Welsh. We had multiple other ones planned, but then COVID happened, where we would get all of the live video content in a place like Miami or LA. We'd invite people there and do a live event to create the content. The audience is there to participate in creating the content and making a great piece of information. And then we would take that, make a long form video, put it on our website, use the clips for LinkedIn. I would give the clips to Josh Braun or Justin Welsh that we professionally post-produce. They post it. It creates awareness for us with people that have a big audience, sort of like a quasi-influencer play. And then the pandemic hits, and the first week we say, okay, live events are out for a while. We're going to go to a virtual event every week. We can do it virtually. We can do it more often. We can do it at a lower cost. And then that became the start of the Demand Gen Live series that I did more than 100 episodes for more than 100 weeks in a row, as well as the State of Demand Gen podcast, which has evolved into the B2B Revenue Vitals podcast now. And then we started doing the podcast, the LinkedIn content, video content accelerated and continued. So instead of putting it out 2 or 3 times a week, I'm doing 5, 6, 7 times a week. Then we run that mix for almost 2 years. B2B companies everywhere are like, they run 5 events and they're like, okay, what's next? What do we do now? How do we get AI into our event? And blah, blah, blah. We ran the same exact play for 2 years because it was the best thing to do in the entire game. There was no reason to go and try and figure out TikTok at that point. We have something that's working so well. And so that's a huge lesson for people. You do not need a bunch of shit to make a huge business impact. We grew from 2 to 20 million on the back of that one move.
Wow.
And then once that happens, then once we have that all done, then TikTok becomes real. There are a lot of B2B people using it. My customers are starting to ask me about it. I'm going to go and figure that out. So then we go on January of 2022, we start actually going on TikTok. I have like 12,000 followers. I'm not exactly blowing it up there, but I know a lot more than most people do about it and how it relates to business results, not driving views. YouTube Shorts has been another one that we started to experiment with. So as the engine starts moving, then we continue to expand as we have more resources and capabilities. How do I know what to talk about on the event? It's because I'm in there. I work with our customers. I talk with our team who has 40 B2B marketers on it. I have 100 comments a day on my LinkedIn post about what people are wondering. I do 2 to 3 live events where people ask questions and bring up new topics and things. I know what people want to hear about. It's not complicated. So what most people fail on with this type of event is that they don't have an insights engine. So they're just doing whatever they think that aligns with their company's value proposition, not what the market actually wants, which is why people don't come back to their events. Or they don't have someone that's either talented enough or dedicated enough to actually do it on a recurring basis for a long enough time for it to build affinity with an audience and trust and actually make it work for the brand. And so those are the 2 places where I see it. But it's not hard when you really understand customers and you really get the insights like all the time. I don't even need to think about what I'm going to talk about. I write down 3 things 10 minutes before the event. I talk about the stuff unscripted, no slides, because I know about them. I use it as a way to experiment with messaging and my perspective and get feedback in a place where I know a lot of people are going to give me good questions and feedback. And so it's just been it's been a super impactful thing. And if you think back, like every company wants to do this right now. At what level they're doing it well? There are not many, but every company wants to be doing it. And I started working on this more than 3 years ago, and back then nobody was doing it.
Yeah, every company wants to be doing this, and so we talked about, like, you just so well broke down how you built a very successful content engine, basically. But that's not all. I think you've also built a thriving community, and I think that's part of it. That's part of your dark social strategy, right? Is community is not necessarily a channel you can track effortlessly, but it is nonetheless I think maybe one of the most important channels that we can invest in today as a marketer. So I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on community building in 2023? How have you done that for Refine Labs? How are you helping other companies take everything that you're talking about, all of these strategies and tactics, and put those together? Because at the end of the day, we want to buy from someone we trust. You talk about this all the time, right? B2B buyers are going to buy from another human that they trust. And it's much easier to facilitate that trust when you are part of a community and you're, facilitating belonging. So I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts, Chris? Tell us.
Yeah, I mean, as I look back, I think like a more formal community strategy might have been a miss. And
Mm,
where we were, we had people show up on the Zoom, but we never brought it to an owned platform or even like a LinkedIn group. We never moved it anywhere but the Zoom.
mm-hmm.
Um, and it's interesting to think back because we considered it but never acted on it. There's a couple of like reasons why that I might explain as I go through this about why we
Yeah.
didn't do it. Um, and now we're actually starting it. We have a paid community that has more than 500, maybe 600 now B2B marketers in there. And one of the main sort of reasons why we didn't do it back then was because I could see how poor free communities acted.
Mm-hmm.
Put together a free community, it gets flooded in, people aren't committed, there's no bar of expectation about what you should do. Even the ones that are like $10 or things like that, you just weren't helpful and attracted the wrong type of person in pursuit of
Mm-hmm.
scale.
Yeah.
So we started to think, wouldn't it be way better if there was just 1,000 people in there instead of 100,000, and they were paying $300 a month, and they actually wanted to be there, and they were all top notch people, and they were all helping, and they got way more value. Like, wouldn't that be better than having 100,000 people and just a noise machine where you can't even keep up with the Slack notifications? So that was one of the main things that we thought about, and then it's like, what is actually going to be different about it? And so what's different about
Mm.
ours is that we have 45, 50 B2B marketing experts that are in the community actually helping you. We send video answers. We actually help people a lot, not just trying to crowdsource it from the community where people get a second job helping other people in the community. Our team actually does that. And then we put together a massive library of resources, templates, and things like that people can use that have been validated from all the work that we do with more than 300 companies over the past 4 years. And so
Mm.
it's not just a community, it's a bunch of proprietary information. It's experts helping you along the way. It's a coaching call that I'm going to do in a little bit, me directly with like 10 people and group coach people on their careers or what they're working on as a
Mm-hmm.
marketing leader, and building something different, building something that we think the market really wants and needs. So that's we you could look at community as a missed opportunity. Some people might look at it that way. For us, I think that it's just about waiting for the right time to be able to deliver something that's truly unique to the market.
Yeah, I think that uh, differentiator is, or whatever your differentiator is going to be, is key, because there are so many, to your point, there are so many free communities out there that are not necessarily all delivering the value that they claim to be. Um,
And then,
okay.
just one
Yeah.
more thing on this point
Oh, yeah.
is that the reason that people are going to join a community and stay are for two reasons. One, the community represents a movement, change in the world, or direction for a professional career that people believe in and are willing to bet their career on. And number two, the people see either qualitative or quantitative professional advancement, learning, or skill development along the way. And if they stop feeling that, then they will leave. If they stop believing in the movement or there is no movement, or so a lot of communities like to surround themselves around a profession, right? Like, okay, we're the 25th community for free community for demand marketers. We're going to call it demand gen. Here we go, right? And so like, yeah, I think you need to be able to actually be representing a key movement, which is I think why our community and our content has been so successful, is because we actually see the world differently, and we're actually right. And we actually help a lot of companies doing it, so we have way more experience than most people do. And so
Yeah.
the movement is huge. And then people keep going back some people showed up to probably 80 of the 100 events that I did, so that means 80 Tuesdays out of 100 on at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. They're showing up for this event for
I was there.
90 minutes because they're getting immense value from being at the event. Like
Yeah.
otherwise they wouldn't do it. They'd be doing something else.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, those are, I think, two key things to make a community happen. And I think surrounding a community around some level of an event strategy is a really good strategy.
Yep. Yep. I totally agree. And I think you kind of said it. I would just say from an events perspective, I think there are two reasons people attend an event. And well, really, and I think the two reasons you spoke to, it's education. They're going to get some values in through some educational content or experience. Or they're going for connection, right? Connection to me, that's the movement, right? Is there a movement? What are they part of? They want to connect to something and to people, right? And then the other reason is just they want to better themselves. They want to up level. They want to learn. They want to grow. They want to gain something that they would not have otherwise gained if they did not attend that event. I love how you broke that down. Okay, so we've not really talked a lot about KPIs, metrics for success. I would love to dip our toes in those waters for a moment if you want to humor me, because I think, we can talk about strategy and tactics until we're blue in the face, but if we don't know what to measure or what we should be looking at, my CMO says all the time, what gets measured gets managed. And so I think going back to a point you made around, are you the kind of marketer that is just focused on lead gen and if that is your North Star metric, then that is, you're going to be managing anything that is, you think is going to, drive you to the output you're looking for. But is that the right thing to manage? Is that the right metric? I know you have strong thoughts here, and I have strong thoughts around event KPIs, but let's start from your perspective first around just the metrics that matter most today for B2B marketers. And then I would love to hear if it aligns with how I think about the metrics that matter most for B2B event marketers. We're a little bit of a niche here, but I would love to get your thoughts on. We've talked a lot about the things that are going to matter most for businesses and marketers today, to play in the game today. And so, what does success look like, and how are we measuring that?
We have to break it down to the three things that I mentioned before, whether you're creating demand, capturing demand, or converting demand, otherwise known as accelerating pipeline. So let's go with creating demand. Let's go with creating demand. We host an event that then becomes a podcast. It becomes a video for YouTube. It becomes a video for our website that we search optimize that page. It becomes an SEO blog. And then it creates 7 videos downstream that our CEO posts on social media. And then the person that he interviewed also had 4 videos. So we're going to give them the videos. So then it's going to be an influencer play. Mm-hmm. And so the event is the enabler of all of these other channels. We cannot look at it by channel. We can't say the event was successful or not while the social media content was. You need them all. And so when we're looking at creating demand, the event should be looked at as a cost to create content. That's it. And it's going to be way cheaper than you hiring some fucking agency for $10,000 to build you a gated ebook for the 5th year in a row. And so you could build an event, you could have 100 people there, and the cost of it would be less than the way that you create content today. So just look at it as a cost to create content and start shifting budget from writing commodity blogs and building ebooks and getting pretty designs on your ebooks, and start shifting some of the money to run this event, which is virtually free. The cost of it is literally the human labor that's on the event. That's it. And the hosting for Zencaster at $12 a month or whatever it is. Right. So content creation, very simple. You should be able to do that, and it should not be scrutinized against anything. And then you can look and say, 40% of our revenue comes from a podcast based on self-reported attribution. Our podcast is doing pretty good. Maybe there's an opportunity there, but that's not why we do it necessarily. It's not how we should look at overall ROI.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have capture demand. Like the main way that companies use events to capture demand are trade show booths. They build a big trade show booth. If you're building a booth, the only way to scrutinize the ROI of that is how much net new revenue did we close, because that is the only thing the booth is doing. If you have active
Yeah.
pipeline, you don't need the booth. If you're creating content, you don't need the booth. So if you're going to spend $250,000 on the booth, then scrutinize against how many net new leads did we get that created pipeline that generated revenue. Is that sufficient or not? I watch companies all the time try and say that a trade show booth was worth the ROI because they closed 2 stage 5 deals that had a meeting in the booth. And it's like, you could have had the meeting in the coffee shop outside and save the 250K and close the same exact deals.
Preach,
So
preach, preach. Yes.
when you're running trade show booths, scrutinize it against net new revenue, not active pipeline, and then decide whether it's worth or not. Most of the time it's not. I'll just fast forward that to you.
Couldn't agree more.
And then lastly, you have pipeline acceleration, and so you can look at this overall and say, we have 50 stage 4 plus opportunities every quarter. We're going to put 25 through an event and 25 not randomly, and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
see if we move certain. It's going to be a $250,000 investment. We're okay with making that investment for the experiment, and we're going to see whether the 25 that we did it for do anything different than the 25 that we didn't do it for. So that's what you could literally just run an experiment, but you need some scale and you need some money. So this isn't just like we're going to go and do one event and say, you need some scale and you need some money.
Yeah.
Another thing that you could do is you could just say, this is part of our customer acquisition strategy for this segment. When we get a tier 1 opportunity to stage 4, part of the sales process is to run a sales event. This is how we run the event. We're going to bake it in. We're going to bake it into the overall cost of acquisition, and we're not going to scrutinize whether the event made that much of a difference or not. We just believe in the strategy that having a face-to-face conversation in this way for 7-figure deals is a good idea, and
Yeah.
it's worth the money. So I think there's a couple of ways that you can look at it, but like the number one opportunity for event marketers is to figure out how to use events to influence the entire marketing strategy. I see events typically on an island. You got field marketing or events over here, and they're
Mm-hmm.
doing stuff, and maybe they're hosting a great thought leadership event, but it never gets converted into a podcast. It never gets downstreamed to social media. They don't get their other people, the CEO or their key evangelists involved in it enough. And so you
Mm-hmm.
just have events sitting over here on the side. I think figuring out as a B2B marketer how you connect all the pieces where you host an event, instead of doing the trade show booth, you host 3 satellite events with evangelists and thought leaders. You record that content. Then you put that content out on the internet. So instead of the 50 people live that you're touching, you actually recorded it and we're smart about it. You put it on the internet and you touch another 100,000 people. It becomes sales enablement materials. You can use it in your outreach cadences. There's so many different ways to use it. But oftentimes just events are not connected with the overall strategy, I find.
I love how you said that and couldn't agree more. I have a very maybe obvious biased point of view, but I think yes, events need to be central and you need to be using them. I talk a lot about there's a different event for a different part of each moment in the buyer's journey, and because that journey is not necessarily 100% predictable and linear, right? I think as event marketers, it's our job to just proliferate the marketing strategy and, make sure we're breaking out of our silos. We can't function successfully on an island at this point. And I think there's a shift. I'm feeling it, at least, this shift in mindset, not just from event marketers, but you know all sorts of marketers and business leaders, I think, are now seeing like, oh shit, like we need events and we need them to get new people in and we need them to move people along and we need them to close more deals and bigger deals and faster. And the ones who are getting with the program are going to see it and in their bottom line, and the ones that are not are going to feel it the most.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk. I think I know, but maybe you know better. Like to me, I think the normal KPIs that I see around events in a silo are either influenced revenue or
Mhm.
number of leads that quote unquote turn into pipeline. Those are the two things. And so the KPIs drive everything, right? That's why you see every company running $500,000 in advertising to get people to sign up to attend their virtual event because they set an arbitrary goal of getting 5,000 registrants. So they blow 20% of their marketing budget on LinkedIn ads, lead gen forms to get people to sign up for the event that most of them never even attend.
Yeah.
That's how a KPI drives the wrong behavior. And then let's talk about influence, because this is what happens too. People want to just pump up some level of influence for events. So we say, oh, our events influence 30% of revenue. But then you look at the influence report and it's just every single department trying to get credit to say that they influenced every deal. And then you look at it and you say, okay, well, yeah, every program did theoretically influence everything, but we spent $10 million on marketing and closed $1.3 million in business last year. The influence model does not account for actual cost effectiveness. And so there's multiple like issues with, I think, how events are measured against today. I lay it out an interesting mindset about how to rethink them. But would be interested in what are those the KPIs, or do you see other KPIs that people are trying to gravitate toward for events?
Yeah, I know. I definitely see that. It's, I always cringe when I hear, this webinar generated X number of MQLs. And I'm like, no, don't say that. Doesn't mean anything. The influenced pipeline or revenue is definitely one. And I actually was just hosting a dinner in Austin. Actually, sad I didn't know you were there. It feels like such a miss that you were not at this dinner. I'll have to get you at the next one.
Cool.
With other B2B marketing and events leaders. And we were taught, I brought up the whole attribution thing, because depending on who is looking at what, you can take one closed one opportunity and see what their journey was, right? What that account's journey was, all the contacts, right? Who engaged with what content, who attended which events. But I mean, how are you weighting each thing? I can't say that them, filling out our pricing form, page is less valuable than them attending the event. I don't know. I just agree with you. I think it gets tricky. I don't have a silver bullet solution. I just know that I have a pretty solid way of showing the impact of the events that I run for Splash. And listen, I can show influenced pipeline, influenced revenue, but that is not the be all end all for me. At the end of the day, I just want to look more holistically, right? And see, work with the other revenue team leaders to look at the journey. And we can't maybe do that for every single opportunity every single day, but we can holistically look and see what drivers are, pushing deals through the funnel faster, right? Is it a higher win rate? Are we seeing better sales velocity? Are we seeing increased ACV? Those are the things that I care more about versus just being in my silo and reporting on the metrics that matter to me. And not to say that those metrics don't matter. I do think that there are certain event KPIs. Of course, you want to look at event attendance. Of course, your attendance rate, right? Of course, you want to look at,
Yeah,
they all matter.
Right. They all matter for some reason, but it's not an executive
Yes.
level KPI. Yeah, you mentioned something that I thought was super interesting. It's like, I think the reason that people struggle with like the marketing influence and things like that is because nobody's looking at or provided a framework to look at it holistically. It's still marketing does this, then the SDRs do this, then sales team does this, and they look at it in three, and then they just measure blanket KPIs across all three of them, like pipeline created and things like that. And it's time for someone to look at it like an overall revenue team and set the KPIs that make sense for each thing, knowing that marketing is going to be creating demand, capturing demand, converting demand. We can't just have performance marketing metrics that incentivize capturing demand. Right. We need to look at maybe if you frame it against what the buyer is doing instead of what the department is doing, you'd actually get a different view. Okay,
I think that is the most helpful way.
these are the resources that we're going to invest to create demand. It might
Mm-hmm.
involve some marketers, it might involve some salespeople, it might involve our CEO, it might involve some people from customer success, it might involve our VP of product. This is the investment and then all the variables that come with it. This is what we're going to do to create demand, and this is how we're going to measure it. This is what we're going to do to capture demand. We're going to buy 6sense. We're going to get intent data. We're going to spend $200,000 a year on Google ads. We're going to build trade show booths. This is what we're going to do to capture demand, and this is how we're going to measure against it, which is how much pipeline are we capturing based on how much we spend. And this is all the investment that we're going to use to convert demand. This is where we're going to do the pipeline acceleration events. This is where all the sales headcount expense goes. This is where all of those different things, and break the budget into those three different things instead of looking
Mm-hmm.
at it just by the department. And then you start to see how imbalanced a B2B like revenue investment really is. It's skewed so far bottom funnel. I don't even like looking
Yep.
at it in a funnel. It's skewed so much to catching demand that already exists versus going out and moving a market and creating demand.
Right. You say it. I'm going to say your words. Like, is your marketing team actually marketing? Or is your marketing team doing the sales work for you? Again, going back to what we were just talking about, is it a sales event? Is it a marketing event? To me, I don't really care. I don't really give a shit if it's a sales event or a marketing event. We need to be aligned around our revenue generating event strategy, right? And
Yeah, and the
it
goal is to
starts with
convert.
creating demand, but also I think, uh, sales can be part of that, especially
100.
if you are, a organization that is growing, right? And you're not a huge like 5,000, 10,000 person company. Your sales team, and maybe actually you have thoughts, maybe even at that point, I don't know, but your sales team has to be part of the demand creation. It's not just on marketing. It's really interesting. I see this happening at so many different levels. Going back to just the event level KPIs, right? One of the things I see marketers and salespeople get hung up on is, well, who's driving registration? Was it marketing? Was it sales? Like, was it the marketing emails that like really like got the registrants, or was it the sales outreach? And I understand from a like personnel management perspective wanting to have your reps know like, well, yes, they have their quota they need to meet, but they also need to drive, let's say it's 50 or 75% of registration for all of your business events. I get wanting to manage down to that level, and at the same time then my mind goes back to what I was saying earlier, is what gets managed, what gets measured gets managed. And so if we're getting so hung up on Sally and Joe drove 50 registrants for this event and Matt only drove 5, that's a problem, right? It's like, no. We're getting way too hung up on the minutia. We're losing sight of our overall team goal. And it just feels like a distraction, you know?
Yeah, and then like if Billy and those people are sales and Matt are sales reps, and some drove 50 and some drove 5, like theoretically, if you drove 50 of your target accounts to register and attend a good event from your company, the odds of you closing those companies that are assigned to you, it's in your best interest as a rep to do it. Or you might be Matt, who only got 5, who thinks these events are shit and they're not going to move my accounts forward, so I'm not going to focus time on them and I'll do other things. And to me, that's really the decision of the sales rep. The sales rep should be able to be creative and be able to make decisions that they think are going to most impact them hitting their number.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very clear. And so if I'm a rep and I think these events aren't going to move my accounts forward, why am I going to waste time there? So
Yeah.
it could be an indicator for you of who believes in the strategy and who doesn't, which doesn't make Matt a bad person. It's just feedback for you to know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh my gosh, we've covered so much ground. I like to always just recap just to make sure I didn't miss anything. We've got a few more minutes of precious time together. So we talked about the 3 different kind of categories of events, right? That you would leverage, creating demand, or your content strategy, and then hopefully feeding your pipeline and helping you close more revenue. We talked about the metrics that matter and how to kind of like get above the noise and the distractions. We talked about marketing and sales alignment. I'm wondering if there's anything else that you would want to close out with, any final pieces of pearls of wisdom or words of advice for B2B event marketers who are either not really sure how to create a cohesive, I'm going to use your language here, dark social strategy for their business, leveraging social, right? Leveraging community, leveraging events, and with content probably at the core of all of those things. What would be, your parting wisdom for them in terms of how to get in the game if they're not already in the game, or how to level up what they're trying to accomplish?
Let's start by saying that events are huge, and they're going to continue to be huge as people push more digital. These, especially in-person events, are going to continue to thrive. How we execute those events need to be completely rethought, and how we connect it to a top-level digital strategy have to be completely rethought. And so, like, the first thing is to decide from a virtual event and a physical event that we need two different strategies and two different goals. Most virtual events should be just used to create content.
Yes.
And if you're not the right person to do that as an event marketer, and you need someone else involved from your demand team or your product marketing team or something like that, then get somebody else involved. And so try and figure out, but virtual event and then physical events. And then on the physical event side, like, you got to really decide what you're trying to accomplish. Like, just doing the same thing and spending half a year designing a trade show booth that you're going to build and then tear down 2 days later and have 300 people walk in to get coffee. Just, we really need to challenge why we still do those things when those booths really started, I don't know, 80s or before, big B2B type of conferences in the 80s or before, and literally haven't fucking changed. So we need to rethink and all that's happened is the cost of them has gone through the roof.
Oh my gosh, it's
How is
insane.
that event more valuable than it was 10 years ago? There's no way. And they cost, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 times as much. We have to rethink why we even do some of these things in the first place. And then the number one opportunity is to figure out how to take events, both virtual and physical and hybrid, and expand them into a top level digital strategy that gets consumed asynchronously, that creates demand. That is the secret for an event marketer. Get out of your silo, whether you get a promotion, whether you just go and take that responsibility because nobody's doing it, whether you put together a proposal about how your team works together to get it done. You decide based on your own organizational dynamics. But this is the opportunity to take the events that you're already doing, where thought leaders and people present great information, and figure out why that isn't on LinkedIn every day, coming from your company brand, CEO's profile, your sales reps sharing it, why you don't have a podcast, when you all the work's already being done and all the money's already being spent. It would cost almost zero incremental to do the rest. I just think it's a massive opportunity and creates the flywheel that gets more people to the events because they see it online. They say, wow, this stuff is really interesting. This company's interesting. I like it. Now I'm going to go and attend live.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think there's a massive opportunity in the event space, but I really think it's a massive opportunity in the marketing department overall. And by combining these things that are siloed, right? We got one person that runs Google Ads. We have one person that runs LinkedIn. We have 3 field marketers that own these types of events or segments. We got our product marketers over here. We got the brand team over here. Everybody's trying to get credit for their shit with the same metrics instead of looking at this and saying, how are we going to bring this all together and drive business growth? And so I think those are the opportunities at the IC and leadership level in marketing today.
Love it. Folks, you heard it here from the man, the myth, the legend himself, Chris Walker from Refine Labs. Thank you so much, Chris. This has been such a treat for me. I know it will be for the listeners as well. Thank you for giving us your take on the role of events in the B2B marketers toolkit today. I want to thank you so much. And to all of our listeners, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, take care.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you, everyone.